How are we doing? How are we doing on this beautiful, wonderful Tuesday on the day of the Sapien? This is Dr. Gregory Clarke Sr. Welcome to the Comeback Conversations with Dr. Clarke as we are completing this arc tonight with a wonderful teaching. We've been dealing with anchors and human architecture the past couple of weeks. And today now we're going to start to bring everything into, put it in a nice bubble, in a nice space. So once again, we appreciate those who continue to support the platform, to be a part of the conversations about the development, not only for themselves as being part of a community, but recognizing how they need to be continually developed on a daily basis. If everyone continues to move in their respective blessings, and as the members of the Comeback Collective Circle are trickling in, I'm going to speak a little bit, have my monologue for this week, for things I've observed, things that have happened, and things that seems to be continuously happening. And part of the monologue, I would go back to something that I watched today. I watched a little bit of the Senate Appropriations Committee have a conversation with the Secretary of Defense and also the Secretary of Agriculture. And it was interesting that it would seem like those two wouldn't go together, but in so many ways they do. Because agriculture, of course, deals with, what we grow, what we produce, what we consume. And we're talking about our internal bodies. And Department of Defense is about, defending the homeland and also being in lockstep with, hopefully, those individuals who are our allies across the globe. Because remember, we're in a global economy. We're in a global space. It's not just about sticking your head in the sand and just assuming that it's about the United States. We have global concerns. We're in a global market. And it was some of the same old. But this time, it seemed like at least some of the senators, and even some Republicans, were pushing back. They was asking some pertinent questions because some of them have to go back to their respective communities and say, well, Donald Trump said he's going to lower cost of living. He's going to, day one, he's going to get rid of the war in Ukraine and our food prices are going to go down. He wasn't going to start no new wars and yada, 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 and yada. And lo and behold, on the day of the Sapien, July 21st, we're still in a war. Gas prices have went back up. After maybe almost the past month, they were starting to go in the right direction. We was even starting to see some threes in certain areas. We were seeing some 340s, some 350s, and like, okay, we're finally getting past the stage that this conflict is over. So for all of you people out there, especially you individuals who got bamboozled into voting this man in to save him from a possible jail sentence, thank you. The reason why I say thank you is you let us know your true colors. You allowed us to see what it is that you're manifesting from a space of, in so many ways, selfishness. Because sometimes we can be so self-centered for ourselves, our own self-interest, that we start to forget about, okay, are we thinking about the community or are you just thinking about yourself? And prior to us going live, I was playing a little Jill Scott today, just to set a vibe, just to set a cool vibe. And the reason for that is, because there's so many times where we move in certain relevant spaces where we have to understand our creativity. We have to understand the impact of our griots. Like, I know last week when I was joking with Nicole about, did she go to the Jay-Z concert? And, because I know she's a Mets fan. So I know she wasn't stepping into Yankee Stadium. But overall, as a New Yorker, you still had a sense of pride to see that camaraderie, that feeling of how that New York energy, the same way when the Knicks won the championship. You felt and appreciated that New York energy. There's something about the energy that we generate. But at the same time, you can look at the energy that's generated by people who have become very self-centered. Now, we're now in a war that we started because of Israel. And because of that, now we don't know how to get out of it. International strait of water that allowed for commerce to go and major tankers going to and fro for God knows how close to a millennia now all of a sudden in conflict. And the short-sightedness of these Europeans, I have to call it what I see it. And the reason why I'm saying Europeans, I'm not talking about those who live in Europe. I'm talking about the ones that live here in the United States that have European descent who sometimes think like they don't have no good sense. The reason for that is because you're so short-sighted to not recognize that these people have been there thousands of years, regardless if you wanted to call them Mesopotamians, if you wanted to call them, Turks, if you wanted to call, whatever it is, because they love to give people symbols and titles and all that. But these people have a history that surpasses the 250 years of this country. And you keep playing a short and small game for greed. Now, I'll be the first one to say capitalism is good. I have no argument with capitalism. Please, if you have a good, if you have a service, if you have something that you're great at and you could be compensated well, get your paper. So don't think here like, as they're trying to throw this foolishness about the Democrats and socialism and all that. No, no, no. There's just certain people now that's coming up in the Democratic Party that's just trying to show the Democrats who have wasted the African American vote that we can do stuff a different way and still be about the people. And that's roughly even some of the Democrats. So be mindful as we're moving closer and closer to November. We're going to see a lot of okey dokes. We saw the foolish speech from last week, Thursday, where he was sounding like a rambling. He sounded like a rambling 80-year-old person now. He sounded like he was sounding his age, and that's sad because these days you can be 80 years old and don't have to move like you're rambling on all over the place. So let's just be in the space of being mindful of some of those areas and things that we should be aware of from a geopolitical standpoint, from a socioeconomic standpoint, because those things do have an effect. They affect people's mental health, physical health, and definitely their spiritual health. So I'm going to decrease off my monologue. And I know usually Miss Johnson has some sort of reverberation. So what do you have to say to my monologue, Miss Johnson?
Good evening, everyone.
Good.
I would say it's a update on current events. You were speaking about the $37.5 billion war, and it was a couple sessions ago we were talking about how much it would cost if some of the richest 0.001% invested money into homelessness and covering food costs. That 37.5 billion could have fed generations of people, but we've basically just thrown it away
Mm,
on a country that says it will bomb itself in order to take out US troops.
mm,
They not playing with us. And we just perpetually seem to make it worse. It's like we're so focused on everyone else that we don't have regulators that are looking at the $1.6 trillion AI debt that is essentially a shell game,
mm.
which is the same thing that caused Enron to go down decades ago and pull other companies with it. So it's like we're intentionally being focused on the wrong thing by our government, by our media. So it's our responsibility to wake up and pay attention, educate ourselves so we can educate somebody else. And I'm complete.
Excellent. And I know last night I was talking, me and Dr. Cheryl were talking because I brought it to her attention. She saw me, she walked by and she saw me looking at my computer and I was very intent. She's like, "What are you looking at?" And I says, "So you see Anthropic done made the settlement for the 1.5 billion." She's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Yeah, there's been a lawsuit that was going on against Claude, well, Anthropic, which is the parent company, one of the major AIs out there, Claude, and they settled. Because one of the things is Anthropic, just like OpenAI, which covers ChatGPT, both of these companies are positioning themselves to go public this year. And Ms. Johnson just brought up something that helped stimulate this part of the conversation. That settlement needed to happen because they didn't need that to ruffle any feathers as they're moving to go into these, these particular trade markets to get this income or get these monies so these companies could be worth trillions and trillions of dollars. And as I started to read it, and Dr. Sherrill started looking at it with me, and it was just reading, I says, wow. It says first they were sued for X amount of dollars and they only ended up with 1.5 billion. You would think that's a lot. But if it's 50,000 plaintiffs, we're only getting $3,000 per work. And the settlement was around the fact that authors or certain individuals accuse Anthropic of using their works to train their LLM. And so they started this back and forth started late 2024 into early 2025. Then they got into the space of saying, okay, let's figure out a way to settle this thing. And even though $1.5 billion is a lot of money, you're not going to sit here and sneeze at that. So, oh, that's just whatever. But when you break it down, $3,000 per work, and most of the individuals said that the most that they can get is $15,000 compared to what Anthropic is going to be worth once it goes public. These are some of the things that we have to be aware of, and at times we're not aware of, but sometimes we get stuck in or just confined to our boxes and not look at the bigger picture and how our money can continuously make money for us. Because as when SpaceX went, public, there's people other than workers who were already entwined there and had their early, stock options and now are millionaires. Their people is going to be their lives are going to be transformed. So being abreast of some of these actions and possibilities that have happened, not only here in the United States, but geopolitically, gives you an opportunity to recognize how is your money supposed to work for you instead of you just working for it. So we're going to go into today's teaching so we can make sure we can stay abreast. Have a good old time. Have a good old time. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Let's get rid of that. Let's see. Okay, let's do this again. So I know I did a boo-boo. Let me do the boo-boo right. That's it. Thank you for being patient with us. All right, the video panel. Now we can do that. Try to make sure we ain't got no boxes that be attempting to infiltrate. How are we looking, Ms. Johnson?
We are box free.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And Dr. Sher, I see you are in the building. Any thoughts about what we were sharing? As I started to share that statement, we was having that conversation last night about Anthropic and training of AI and becoming abreast of the tools around us. Anything you would say to that before we get into conditioning to conscious creation?
Good evening, everyone. The only thing I would say is that just to stay abreast of what's happening in the current. So would you reading that article? It's just many more to come, and it's going to be changes after changes. So it's just important for us is to stay abreast of what's happening in the current. And I'm complete.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So from conditioning to conscious creation. So like 2 weeks ago, we were dealing with human architecture. We were dealing with conditioning. We were dealing with some of the foundational spaces of how, we end up becoming who we are. And most times it's about how we were influenced, how we were expressed, how our parents dealt with us, how we interacted with our peers, what it is that we've dealt with in our respective ways and beings and movements as individuals. See, we're not here just to exist. There's an actual space of living. That's why I call it the business of living, taking on the moniker of what Reverend Reverend Frederick Eichencoder, as many people know him as Reverend Ike. He was the initial person that stimulated that thought about the business of living, and it's so true because too many times, especially in the African American and Latino experience, our Black and Brown people, We're so much positioned about getting a good job or just go to school to get that good job. And it's like, wait a minute, are you building a life? Because you don't want to be caught up in that rat race where you may have all these loans, student loans, or all these different things that are conditioning you to keep you in a particular box. And then when you recognize that you're ready to expand out this box, you have all of these things that tying you down. And even from a biblical space, it talks about the space that, be the lender, not the borrower. And even if you do borrow, how do you borrow effectively? Do you borrow to go purchase assets or to have the possibility to earn so that not only are you paying back what you borrow, but you have something left over to show for it? Now, that's being wise when you start accessing the credit markets. That's why you heard me earlier talking about OpenAI and Anthropic. Once these become public companies, these both of those companies are going to be worth at least $1 trillion. That means there's going to be people that are going to be attempting to catch up to Elon being the world, since he's the world's first trillionaire. Even though I keep bringing it back to the fact that Mansa Musa was the person, when you do your research, Mansa Musa was the richest person who ever lived. But with Elon being the second trillionaire, we start to understand that how you position yourself. And that starts in our conditioning level. And even after a while, we have to allow our conditioning to work for us and not be stuck in conditioning that doesn't work. And then last week, we were dealing with anchors. Anchors is about those things that we cement in our lives. Last week's conversation was powerful. We had some stimulated debates. If you missed it, you can catch up on that on my YouTube channel at Dr. Gregory Clarke, Master Coach. And the reason why that conversation last week was so powerful, because last week you started to hear members of the circle, giving those things that were some of the anchors in their respective lives. And, how that smell of, I think it was Mr. Sampson talked about that smell of oxtails if you walk into the house. All of a sudden, he knows it's a good day. That pot is cooking up, or, regardless of whatever it is. Whatever that sensation is an anchor. And now we can deal from the condition in our respective anchors. And now we have to take those things and figure out how can we consciously create? Because we are responsible for what we're creating daily, what we're positioning ourselves to be, how we're recognizing what's happening. We already know that the mind is a meaning-making machine. What meaning? Even today, as we're going in the monologue, I wasn't sharing that information to be negative. I'm just sharing that information to be from a space of, let's look at the pragmatism of what's going on around us. Because when you start to move in the sense of understand that you're not slow and you see what's happening, sometimes you just got to shake your head and be like, okay, how do we navigate this season effectively so that what they're attempting to condition the people to be in or to anchor them within, we're recognizing that we're not allowing that to be the okey doke that's attempting to position us someplace that doesn't work, but we keep consciously creating. Okay, Ms. Johnson, can you read the title of this slide?
Beyond psychology.
Psychology often examines, these are some of the caveats, behavior. Why do we do it? How come we do it? Because even when you sometimes say a child is misbehaving, sometimes you got to look at the background. Why did that child misbehave? What was going on within that individual? So even if we move it from children, why does this person continue to do things that just is not aligned even for themselves? So psychology often examines behavior. Now it also examines emotions. What are those feelings that are generated? Why are we choosing to make those particular areas? Where did that emotion come from? Where was the spark that started to work with the behavior to create whatever moment or whatever capacity that occurred? Our memories. They say usually you can probably go back as early as maybe 2 or 3 years old. Can't sit here and say, yeah, I remember what I did as a baby. No, you do not. The synapses of our brain wasn't starting to form. That's why usually once you hear a child start saying no and starting to articulate the language that they hear, which usually starts about 18 months to 2 years of age, that's when you know the synapses in their brain are starting to connect. Now they're starting to hold on to things. That's why they're able to respond. So that's memory. And our learning, our ability to be in those respective areas and spaces. So Hermetic philosophy emphasizes consciousness, symbolism, and inner transformation. That's why we're moving beyond the space of psychology. But now when we really think about it, both perspectives seek to understand how inner life influences outward action, though they raise from different traditions. Yes, Ms. Johnson.
I had a little mental brain freeze. What is Hermetic philosophy, please?
Hermeticism is more of a background of new thought, of what they would say would be not so much its own traditionalism within the fact of faith-based or spiritualism, but is an aspect of taking the patterns and the thoughts that we were expressed through in one particular realm and allow them to move into a higher form of consciousness. That's why when you hear the word hermetic, it emphasizes about the consciousness. Now we're dealing with your being beyond those things that you can not necessarily touch. Hermeticism will also deal with your symbolism. What are the cycles and things that you adhere to or allow yourself to be expressed through? We all have symbolisms, even from a cultural standpoint. And depending upon what level are you looking at, are you looking at it from a glass half empty, or if you're looking at it from a glass half full? And also Hermeticism always goes back to the self, to the inner transformation. It's been too many times, even in a lot of our faith-based situations and spiritual situations, everything always attempts to seek to put ourselves outside of ourselves. And ultimately, once you start to have that inner transformation or that possibility of recognizing that you must have that inner gaze or that inner ability to have some sort of responsibility of the self, that's when you truly start to get connected to your higher level. Hopefully that helps explain. Did that help explain that?
Yeah, so basically deals with interconnectivity, essentially, is what I got from your explanation. Is that correct?
Definitely. And our interconnectivity always starts from our spiritual space. And one of the things we sometimes make the assumption, and we all have done it, so it's not a make wrong, where we put stuff outside of ourselves to say, that title or that position or what I have or all the different trappings of what I have or what we may be experiencing makes me me. And ultimately that doesn't make you you. What makes you you is okay, what is that inner that inner thing. Sometimes we may call it the sixth sense, and we may call it the soul, whatever that thing that we are really connected to, that we all have. Even people who claim to be atheists, they have that, because you wouldn't have that because you have to have that, and that shows a higher power because you have the choice to say that you're allowing yourself to say you feel that there's nothing out there when there is. And so, and plus, I would ask you to do me a favor because I know you're probably connected with your respective assistants. Why don't you type in what is Hermeticism, and so we can hear what you found in regards to Hermeticism. Because right now I'm going to go to Dr. Cheryl Clarke because I know from a psychological space she deals with this stuff, especially as she deals with this stuff on her respective platform. She deals with this with her clients, her individuals that she is shepherding through, certain possibilities and situations. And so I would love her, thought pattern in regards to why we're saying we're going beyond psychology, not negating it, not minimizing it, but we're going beyond it.
You want me to say that question? You want me to answer?
What is it that you see as we're talking about going beyond psychology? As you know, you have a psychological base in the way that you work with people. But based upon what we're talking about here, we're combining going beyond psychology and moving into other philosophies as well.
Um, in regard, I can't really speak to Hermeticism because the
No, no,
philosophy
I want you to stick with
in
psychology.
regards to that, but in regards to psychology,
Mhm.
um, in the first part of it, and often, yes, psychology does examine the behavior, the emotions, memory, and learning. All those things do have a sense of being of who we are in the space. And I really appreciate because when you put all of this has to do with your inner world. It shapes you, your behaviors. It comes from your emotional state, your memory, your learning. So all of that, and if I come from a psychology point, what we believe and what we experience, it gets trapped into our nervous system of learning. So a lot of times when that transformational thing happens and unlearning and relearning and healing, we become aware of the patterns and then we can intentionally shift those things and choose better choices of behaviors and don't have to stay in a space of what we learned as a child or as a young adult. And then we can move in a more retrospective type of way. And I'm complete.
For that. Miss Johnson, were you able to find anything about Hermeticism?
I sure was.
Come on. What did you
All
find?
right. Hermeticism is a religious, philosophical, and
Mhm.
mystical tradition that seeks to understand the nature of God, the universe, and humanity's place within it. And more importantly, Hermeticism is better understood as a path of spiritual philosophy focused on wisdom, self-knowledge, and inner transformation.
And see what is so powerful about what we're doing here as the Comeback Collective Circle. We're not just here telling you about how and giving you applicational tools or principles about, how your money can work better for you. That's part of it. But we're also dealing with you as a full individual. That's why we're talking about the whole man or the whole woman. When we start to think about that, instead of being fragmented and recognizing that it may sound like a broken record when I say this, but it's about you living your life recognizing there is no box. Only reason why you're in a box because you put yourself in it. And after a while, and that memory of Miss Johnson sending me and Dr. Cheryl Clarke something last week Friday had me recognizing about, you start to recognize there's no boxes. There is no box. Now, whatever box that you choose to put yourself in and then start to complain about, now you have to recognize, okay, what behavior, what emotion are you attempting to present, and what memory or what type of positioning of your learning that you've allowed yourself to say that this box is where it feels comfortable. Instead of recognizing that you can have all. That's one thing I love about Hermeticism is that as you go down the pathway, you start to recognize it's about you building up the pathways to add, not necessarily take away from what you learned, because what you learned is what you learned. Now, when you start to learn something better or something that is allowing for development to happen, now you're not just stuck in saying, oh, this is what they taught me, so this is what I'm going to keep doing. And that's why I love the image on the right because it just shows, the brain, the actual muscle of the brain at work in a book. Now, that book could have been something that was written hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago. But depending upon how much that you desire for a level of inner transformation to happen, you can take that same work and elevate it. Or, as we've seen people do in the past, especially when it came from a religious standpoint, we can see how you can attempt to use religion to confine people, to keep them to play small. Any thoughts from anyone before we move on to the next slide? Excellent. A model of human development. Each layer can influence the next, and change may begin at multiple points in the process. So, as we can see, thoughts will move into a motion. You see how the arrows are pointing to one above the other? And the reason why I structured this like this, along with the picture on the side about the root system, as you can see, the roots are not moving in one particular straight down arrow way. And sometimes we can look at life like that. It's like, okay, why is the roots going like that? Why is there a part of the root system that's going out, going left, going right? And the same way we as humans have a root system that at times we have to see where are the different possible points that we are in our respective developmental cycles. And then what are we choosing to do in those respective cycles? So, everything starts from thought. And once your thought is cemented, then you start to recognize what is the emotion that you're going to work within that thought. And after the emotion, you start to move towards a belief system. What is the belief system that you have? Because that belief system is going to help shape your identity. See, what you believe about yourself, listen to my words carefully, what you believe about yourself will start to cement and say, oh, so this is what I believe about myself. So this is what I'm identifying as. And then as you start to move in those respective identities, that's going to influence your behavior. Are you going to act like some people may say from ghetto, bougie, whatever distinction? What is your behavior type? What are your behavior movements? And see, those behaviors are going to lead into your habits. Because now, depending upon, and those habits include what you may be putting in your body, how you're taking care of your body, how you're taking care of your mind, how you're taking care of your finances, how you're taking care of everything. Those are all habits. And then those habits will generate life outcomes. So I would ask Mr. Sampson, when you look at this particular slide, do you feel that any of these things are very part of our human development process, or do you sometimes see that we may have individuals who lack some of these?
No, I think it's pretty extensive. I can't foresee at the moment anyone missing any of these things because we all think, you know, different levels of thought, but we all think, which definitely affects our emotions and our identity, which, yeah, it's conclusive for me. I don't think anyone's missing any of these things. It's just, of course, just like the roots have different lengths, thicknesses, and directions, so do our thoughts, emotions, beliefs, identity, behavior, habits, and ultimately our life outcomes. All are on different levels, different angles, different points, but we definitely go through all of these things. I am complete.
Excellent. Dr. Cheryl, I know you do some work with Speak Your Power Now, and even some of the work that you do, group work with, some young ladies with Girl You Cute. What would you say to this in regards to, or could you correlate this with some of the work that you're doing?
Yes, this is definitely down my lane in regards to human development. In regards to human development, I mean, think the model itself shows it in the way of how a person like outcome, your thoughts, your emotion, your beliefs, identity, behaviors, your habits. But when you look at all this, it's not just one thing, and like you have the arrows moving it forward. And in order for us, sometimes what I notice with people, at times they may get interrupted from a thought or emotion. And sometimes that belief will impact your identity, it will impact your behaviors. So certain things along the way does impact these things, and it's not just a straight arrow. So I like that it's misaligned a little bit. The lines, the arrows are misaligned. They're not straight, but it does go, and it's not necessarily doesn't have to go in the right direction, in the same direction, and they build on each other. So it's important for us to understand that life doesn't go in always the same way, but sometimes it's going to be a misalignment. And it's important for us to understand when misalignment does happen to get in spaces so you can begin to shape that identity and experiences that we've had. And then you could be able to process that throughout your life. And I'm complete.
I want to piggyback. I want to keep you there for a moment. You said misalignment. How do we get misaligned?
Well, the misalignment comes with it occurs when there is no awareness surrounding certain things for sure. And life happens, and then you get misaligned a little bit. So it depends on your thoughts, it depends on the beliefs and things of that nature. And sometimes we allow things to define us. And life is not about it being permanent, but at times when we get misaligned, we got to create a safe space to get realigned. And that requires a safe community, that requires a therapist, that requires someone that can support you in your next. So going through these things, you may get misaligned, but it's always a way that you can become realigned.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Anything else from anyone? Any thoughts from anyone before we move on?
Yes, Dr. Clarke, I'm just loving the photo. You didn't address the issue of the layers of soil.
Hmm.
And I'm loving that the fact that, some roots only got through one layer, others are down in the second layer, and then there's very few that made it to the ultimate lowest layer, but they all work together for the beauty of the tree that's above the ground. So I just was admiring the photo. I'm complete.
Thank you for that. And that's where at times, even going back a little bit about Hermeticism and dealing with the inner work, so many times we can be so focused on our outside trappings that we don't recognize that, we have to thank our lungs. We have to thank our heart. Sometimes we don't take the time to thank our stomach, our liver, our kidneys, you know, the blood vessels that's running up and down from the soles of our feet all the way up to the top of our head. All these things is part of, we have natural root systems, even as humans. And there are so many opportunities to look at nature and how nature can be such an assistance with us. And looking back at this tree, we was by this tree, the tree would be happy that we would be around because each time we exhale, we're pulling all the oxygen that the tree is generating. And it becomes a symbiote, it becomes something that's very symbiotic. It becomes something that becomes so workable and how we can stay in concert with the environment around ourselves. And so as we continue to develop ourselves in our humanistic qualities, we still have to understand you only go as deep as you so choose to go. Certain people like that surface level. Some people just want to see what's on top. They want to see the soil. They want to see, it's like our skin. People want to see just the dermis. And then you recognize it's an epidermis. There's another layer. We're talking about our skin, which is the biggest organ in our body. You got the dermis is what you touch. Then the epidermis is that layer and level right underneath it. And then there's other layers on top of that. But sometimes people will make the assumption, oh, what's the biggest organ of your body? And they're like, oh, my heart or my dick. No, it's your skin. That is the biggest organ of your entire body. That's why, like, even when Dr. Shaw always tells me or advises me to talk about all the weight I've lost and that I can see I have hanging skin. But that is part of an expression to show how I treated that organ. Skin is an organ. Now, eventually, depending upon what I choose to do with that, there's so many different ways, especially in this particular season and technologically prowess time frame that we're all dealing with. But even then, you start to look at it, it's like, wow, or even when a woman experiences those stretch marks from childbirth, that just shows the capacity of the body even to be expandable and then even have the ability to contract. And so we all have those abilities depending upon how we allow ourselves to be in those spaces of development, to see things manifest ourselves, depending upon what we choose. How deep do you desire to go? Do you desire to be at that first level? You'll get first level experiences. But I know as I'm looking at that same picture that Mr. Sampson has made me more aware, I'm seeing there's a part of it that's going down there in some deeper levels where that soil is a little bit much more refiner and finer than it is even at the topsoil level. Any other thoughts? Go
Yeah,
ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Shaw.
I want to say something for this picture. And I think that Brother Sampson brought this to my attention. When you asked me to address this, I didn't even see the tree.
Mm.
I didn't even see the tree. I was so focused on the words. I didn't even
Mhm.
see the tree. And this is where sometimes we're in a space that we don't see the tree.
Mm.
We don't see certain, we don't see, I'm sorry, we don't see the whole picture.
Mm.
It's in front of us. So it's important for us to understand what it looks like. And so all of us have an assignment here on earth. And what is that assignment? We came with a picture. And what is that picture that we're going to fulfill? And it's layers. And he made a valid point. Some of those roots that are on top may not ever reach the bottom. It may not ever reach the bottom. And that's okay. Because whatever it's supposed to be doing in that layer and whatever we're supposed to be doing, but sometimes we can get sidetracked on what we're taught, who's in our ear, and the things around us. So it's important. Like I know this platform, Dr. Clarke talks a lot about money and finances, and he talks a little bit about his health, which I'm excited that he's doing that more and more. It's an opportunity for us to understand the layers that we are in, and this current that we're in is important for us to understand the layers of even our thought, our emotion, our beliefs, our identity, even concerning our money, even concerning what we say, even concerning what we do, even with this AI thing that's happening. So it's important. I want to thank Brother Sampson for even bringing us so we can see the whole picture when something is presented and complete.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Because yeah, there's so many times that things can be presented to us that we just don't allow for ourselves to be aware of. And I appreciate Dr. Sher bringing that up because, even looking at the picture now, the picture becomes much more refined. You start to look at the root system as not just roots, but you start to see, how integral do you allow yourself to be connected in certain things? And remember, it's not a make wrong. It's about, okay, what were you exposed to so you can become aware? There are times that we're seeing, and I know last week we were talking about like Nolan Wells and things of that nature. And you start to see in this past week they had his home going. And you start to recognize, that was a powerful tree, another powerful tree that we don't know how far that root system could have went. What could have happened? And all those I couldas and wouldas and shouldas, and you sit there like, wow. It becomes much more paramount for us to be aware from a spiritual sense, aware from a health sense, aware definitely from a financial sense, because no one's coming to save us. If we're not willing to be in community and share pertinent information that's going to allow for full development. And full development is not about you, okay, you're a good person and you believe in God. That's great. But you're walking up 20 flights in a building that has a broken elevator. That's not making any good sense. There's a disconnect somewhere. There was something that was established in your identity that's allowing you to move like that. And some of it, and most of it, and some of it is, I'm gonna say most of it and some of it. And I know it may sound like a dichotomy, but actually isn't. A lot of this stuff is systemic. Even up to when they was talking about the World Cup final this past week. And Argentina, regardless if they have one of the greatest soccer players in the world, has been known to be very, very disgusting when it came to their Afro Argentines, and also even some of the things that you can find out from a historical standpoint of how they dealt with people from the diaspora, from the continent of Akubalan, and to see how they turned their backs while Spain was celebrated. It's funny when you laugh at it to see how most of Spain won, And most of the individuals who are the best players are all of African descent, and it just makes you laugh. Because Spain is not too far from the northern part of Africa. It just makes you laugh. With the Argentinians turning their back and then want to, showing very poor taste. But sometimes your true character comes out, like how we talk about here in the United States. Sometimes your true character comes out. We have a man in office who has lied from day one. The war is going to be over. I'm going to end that war in Russia and Ukraine on day one. Lie. I'm not going to start any new wars. Lie. I'm not going to cut, health care because I'm still jealous over Obamacare. Lie. I'm going to lower your grocery bills and I'm going to make sure you lie, 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 lie. Now, what do you do with that? Do you recognize a spade as a spade and say, okay, now I know how to course correct? Because their particular root system is going to be for themselves. But when you start to recognize that humanity should have different points where we allow all the different colors to work together. And if we allow that, then things will eventually one day get better. But this particular globe that's spinning very fast that we don't feel it as we keep moving. So we're going to move on. Great conversation. Great conversation. Okay, Ms. Johnson, can you read this slide for us, please?
Symbols matter. Throughout history, people have used rituals, language, stories, symbols, music, and ceremony. These practices can reinforce shared values, identity, and meaning.
Mm-hmm. And as we can see by the picture, I'm seeing a scroll, I'm seeing some bowls, I'm seeing different artifacts, different expressions. And it's interesting at times, sometimes we look at someone else's expression and want to make their expression wrong. Why is that like that? And it's not like how it is. And it's not just this, and it's not just that. It's like, wow. How did we ended up limiting the creator of the universe into it's just this? And that's why the symbols do matter. And we start to respect the fact that the symbols matter for this cultural dispensation, and the symbols do matter for that cultural dispensation. And one of the things that they did, especially with us as African descent, is that when they saw our symbols, they attempted to minimize it or demonize it, or to say that it was otherness, or to say, but you need that as part of your foundation from a cultural diasporic standpoint. And it almost becomes a very, very pertinent crime. When people can't remember, it's like, I can trace my lineage to this and I can trace my lineage to that. But if you say my lineage is this, that means that it must be something wrong with them. Who said it was something wrong? Who made up that rule? People from the Caucasus Mountains? This makes you wonder. Now, Ms. Johnson, how did I not know? Even before I saw I was just about to say, something told me just go to Ms. Johnson, because I know Ms. Johnson got a question. I also saw it pop up. Ms. Johnson got a question. Go ahead, Ms. Johnson.
Less of a question, more of a statement.
Mm-hmm.
I want us to also consider that it's not that they want to minimize or demonize, but they've seen the power and reality of what these symbols are.
Mm.
If you think about some of the world leaders who go to certain quote unquote third world countries
Mm-hmm.
and participate allegedly in ceremonies, get results, and then magically keep going back to these third world countries that would seem of no benefit for them, but they continue to go back and continue to receive positive results in their political and financial lives. So it's like, I know the power. I can't have you knowing the power because then I lose my power. Certain cultures are not matrilineal or family oriented. It's all about the self. Black and brown people do not have that same cultural lineage. So if they are taught, hey, we can share and be 10 times greater than our oppressor.